Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
We're going to get the Inside Scoop from three labor and political experts. And the subject tonight is what kind of initiatives should the labor movement be pushing for, or what are they pushing for, that will address labor's agenda, the working class agenda, over these next 2 to 4 years. Our experts, first, on my far left, Dan Duncan, president of the Northern Virginia Labor Federation, and Dolores Trevino Gerber from the Communications Workers of America. And then in the second half of the show, we'll have Boaz Young-El from the Unified Food and Commercial Workers Union. So let's put up this graphic, which kind of tells a huge story. Jim, can we put the graphic on the air, please? From 1948 to 1979, compensation tracked productivity in America. But since 1979, it has widely diverged. Productivity has continued as an inexorable march, but real hourly compensation as a function of productivity has stagnated. And this tells a story of the 1% versus the 99%, because that increase of productivity raised wages across the board. And all of that money obviously went to the 1%, not to the 99%. The other graphic that we need to kind of tee up this conversation with is male civilian employment. Regardless of what we hear about unemployment rates, male civilian employment overall is going down and has been for a long time. About 2/3 of the workforce is working, 1/3 of the workforce is idle. So they're either out working, looking for work, or they have given up and they're no longer looking for work. That is this kind of, call it the silent majority in Nixon's terms, of people that are dissatisfied with where government is going, dissatisfied with the job picture. So Dan, Northern Virginia Labor Federation, what can we do about this? How can we change those two trends?
Well, first, thank you for having us on your show tonight. We really appreciate it. How can we change these trends? It's something that we've been questioning for decades, as you can tell from the first chart. We've been seeing wage stagnation. It is something that is driving people absolutely nuts. We keep hearing about an economy that is getting better and getting stronger. You take a look at Wall Street numbers and you keep hearing record performance there, but the take-home pay, what the average worker is bringing home, has stayed flat.
And we're talking about union and non-union.
We're talking all workers.
We're just talking workers right now.
We're talking workers in general. And the problem that we've been seeing is, when you take a look at that first chart, is that's roughly when the attacks on labor unions started taking place. Now, a lot of people think that labor unions were not taking care of everybody, but folks don't understand that when union members are strong, the whole economy is strong. All workers benefit from a strong labor movement. And starting with 1980, or actually 1981 with the Reagan administration, we started seeing the direct attacks on unions. Well, at that point, productivity kept climbing, except for a couple of spurts with economic problems, but wages have stayed the same. It probably is calling for new leadership, Jeff. Leadership among the political people, leadership among the business people as well, and leadership among the workers. It's going to take an effort to cooperate among the three to see if we can't get some changes made, to get some of the laws changed, to get some of the attitudes changed. Prior to the Reagan administration, people aspired to get what unions had. Unions were able to contract and work to get health care, to get pensions, to get better pay. And suddenly people were being told, you don't want that anymore. Look what he has, take it away from him and keep what you've got. And it's going to take a whole swing of attitudes that we haven't seen lately. And quite frankly, you saw, and I know we'll discuss this later, we saw it in this last election where the core base for the Democrats, the union worker, or not just union workers, but the middle class vote, the African American vote, the Latino vote, just stayed home because they were not liking what they were hearing from both sides of the political spectrum. In fact, they don't even think there's two sides. They think there's one and one and a half. And
so the dissatisfaction is not really class-based or ethnic-based. It goes across the spectrum.
Cuts across all lines.
Dolores, how do you see this? Same question to you. Why is this happening, and what can we do about it?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems, and you can see where the graph showed the hourly compensation for workers, people are very productive, but it's because they're working 2 or 3 jobs to provide food on the table for their families, to be able to provide roof over their heads,
and basics.
A lot of the basics. And a lot of times, it's not because they're not working. It is they're working. It's just that they are not able to provide the basics for their family on one job. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the minimum wage is not a livable wage. And so they cannot do it on one job if they're getting minimum wage. And a lot of jobs, and I'll be very honest, because I was very blessed to have a job that was a union job, and I had benefits. I had a very livable job. When I was working, I had 2 kids to support, and it was a job that provided that for them. But had I not had that job and I had to have a minimum wage job, it would have been extremely difficult to have done that. So you have to look at the type of jobs that are available out there. And right now, people are not having jobs that provide them benefits, provide them enough money to provide the extras for their families. They don't have that. So when you had the other graph on there about the male workers, I felt like it didn't take into account all the women that have to work. No. And because it is no longer just the males that go out to work. It's a 2-member household that has to work to provide for their families. It is no longer just a 1 member. Sometimes it's the whole family. The kids have to get to work after school. It takes the whole family to provide for their families.
You make an excellent point. Again, the problem goes across genders, and it goes across races, and it also goes across both U.S. and abroad. I think, Dan, you had some comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the minimum wage. I mean, let's look at the fact right now that we're trying to get a 10-10 minimum wage. Well, in the D.C. area, actually in the United States, poverty for a family of 4 was $23,500 last year. That's $11.32 an hour. So 10-10 doesn't even bring you to minimum wage. So this is what we're fighting for. And a minimum wage is basically, it's not even a living wage. The living wage in this market's even far higher than that. It's almost $15, $16 an hour, just so you can have the bare minimums of housing, shelter, and food for your family.
But the issue is greater than minimum wage. Absolutely. Yes, minimum wage workers need a raise. Understand that, and that's well articulated. And there are some, I guess there were like a half dozen states in this last election, which, although it was a way for the Republicans, passed increases to their state minimum wage. So there's kind of a momentum that's possibly gaining there.
Neighbors can see what's happening to neighbors. They want to take care of their fellow man.
But minimum wage is not going to change this number.
No,
true.
It's not going to change that productivity divergence. So, the question, a reasonable question is, what will?
Well, we talked earlier today, before coming on the air, about free trade. In the labor movement, we don't have a problem with trade, but what we have a problem with is how free trade is administered. We would rather see fair trade. Fair trade where all sides get taken care of, from the workers to the businessmen. No, we're not against somebody making a profit. I mean, that's what keeps things going. But you've got to share the wealth. You've got to let everybody in on it. And that's what happened in America after World War II, all the way up into the 1980-81 recession. Workers were able to take advantage of the wealth that was being made by the companies because they were sharing it. They were sharing in the prosperity. They were making it work. Since we've had these new free trade programs come in, we've seen, about 20 million manufacturing jobs leave the United States. And who would have been most affected by manufacturing jobs? Well, male employment. Yeah. And all this manufacturing, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. When I go back to Cleveland once a year, I see the factories where my father worked, with the broken windows, with the empty smokestacks, and with the padlocks. These were all good paying jobs that took care of families. My mom and dad provided for my sisters and myself, and we became the first generation to go to college. Where's that hope? Where's that attitude now?
Yeah. Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, let me read a recent quote. He was talking at the National Press Club just last week. He said, "The overwhelming view of the average voter is that trade overall has hurt their wages and that we should do something about it." But again, my question is, what's the something? Dolores, you want to take that on?
Well, I think that's one of our big concerns as Communication Workers of America. Our president has really led the fight against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the problem with that trade issue right now is not so much, as Dan said, we don't fight trade, we want fair trade. And one of the biggest problems with this TPP, as it's called, it's been so secretive. And the people that have been in on it, not even the congressmen, a lot of congressmen have not even received the information as to what's going on. But the companies have, the corporations, the governments of all these countries that are going to participate in it have been in on the meetings and the dealings that are going on behind the scenes. And so it's very difficult for us as unions, and we work with a coalition, so it's not just the labor unions, but it is also the Sierra Club, and it's environmental organizations, people like that are interested in knowing, what is this going to do? How is it going to affect us? And some of the information that's been leaked out doesn't bode well for any of us, because it's going to affect the workers, the environment, and also the
trading
jobs
partners
being trained. Yes, right. Everyone else.
I'm Jeff Barnett. You're watching The Inside Scoop. We're talking about labor and political issues, talking about trade, and we're going to get much more into trade in 2 minutes. Be right back.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
How do you lose volunteers?
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm Jeff Barnett, and we're talking the politics of trade and working people and the minimum wage. I'm talking with two experts from organized labor, with Dan Duncan and with Dolores Trevino Gerber. Let's talk a little bit. Dolores, you're from the communications workers, and I guess your boss, Larry Cohen, says in the next 6 months we're going to be relentless on trade. What does that mean?
As I said, he has been tireless on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We are going to do everything, and we have been, to educate our members, and we have been organizing with other coalitions of other organizations on trying to get the information out on TPP, because we feel that this is going to be devastating to jobs and to the environment, to every other organization's issues.
What I understand for TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is that it eliminates tariffs. So it's kind of a NAFTA on steroids.
Yes.
And labor is saying that it's going to increase imports to the United States and decrease jobs within the United States. In return, the fastest growing part of our sector is IT. It will put in greater restrictions on protecting intellectual property. Is that a fair trade? If that's what it is?
When you look at some of the trades or some of the
offset
balances that they're going to, the intellectual property, some of the things that they're going to do there is that they're being very liberal in what they're going to allow them to do. And some of also the tariffs that they're going to lift, some of the pharmaceutical companies are loving it because it's going to allow them to make changes to the rules that they have on generic drugs, on how long they can keep it, a drug before it becomes generic.
Well, I'm sorry, here in the U.S. or overseas?
Overseas. And so for HIV type drugs, it's going to allow them to keep the prices high for a long time. So that definitely is not going to help the poorer countries who can't afford them. And so there's different companies that it's going to help, and that's how they've been hiding a lot of these things in some of the papers that are coming out. So some of this information has leaked out. Some of the people that have been going to these meetings have let some of this information out, and that's how we have found out some of these, some of the things that they're trying to pass. And the offshoring, especially of jobs, is what we're most concerned about, because one of the things that we have is, well, of course, with Communication Workers of America, we have call centers. We have a lot of workers that work there. In fact, that's what I did most of my career with Verizon and with what previously was Southwestern Bell, then it became AT&T. And so that's what I did most of my career. Well, a lot of those jobs are being offshored out to India, to Malaysia, and the Philippines. So these companies, or these countries are now, they're getting all their plans ready. Bank of America, the Citicorp, and I think there's some other companies they're already planning. They're getting rid of some of their call centers here in the U.S. In fact, they announced late last year they were laying off people because they're already planning on getting their centers built elsewhere, because that's easier for them and it's much, much less expensive for them.
Dan, what's your position on TTP?
TTP is like all the other trade agreements that we've been fighting, going back to NAFTA. It is a case of let's have some fair trade. Let's make sure that the American worker is taken care of. We keep hearing that there's labor agreements in these trade bills, but when they start to try to enforce them, There is no enforcement. Fortunately, the last couple of years, the steel workers, who had taken over the rubber workers union,
right,
have been able to get some of the tariffs added back to Chinese tires who've been coming in, the heavily subsidized tire companies. If you take a look at even companies with American names like Firestone and Goodyear, you don't know quite where the tires are made unless you know the secret code on it. It is a case where we, again, as I said before, we're not against trade, but we're against just total capitulation. And one of the things that bothers me very much is I am my union's representative. My home union is the Seafarers Union. Well, we're all about trade. We're sailing things in and out of the country. I am my union's representative for the U.S. Trade Representative's Office for Labor. Since the Obama administration came in, we've had one meeting. Now, as Dolores was saying earlier, a lot of this is being done in secret. Well, I don't know whether that's secret or not, but we have not been called back to the U.S. Trade Representative's Office for anything. Though we still have access to information that's never posted, but...
And this is with a Democratic administration.
This is with a Democratic administration.
So why is that? Why is... I mean, if you were the president sitting here and you were trying to explain why you're doing this, there has to be a logic to it.
I'm sure that they think there is. I have not seen it. Others who work with different unions feel the same way. We are just very concerned about keeping jobs, good paying jobs, decent jobs for American workers. Yes, there is a new economy coming. Yes, there are some trade-offs. But quite frankly, why do we have to keep trading off our jobs to send them overseas? And as Dolores can tell you, a prime example is U.S. Airways, who's now going to become American Airlines, had communication workers in their call centers all throughout the United States, busted all those places, sent them overseas. The jobs were so poorly done that they brought them back to the United States, but they don't want them union. So we've had to fight to try to get back the jobs we once had, and when they do come back, they're at a far lower rate than the wages that they had before they shipped them out.
In many respects, labor is at a crossroads. The number of manufacturing jobs particularly have gone way down. There has been growth in the construction industry, mm-hmm. and there's been growth in the service sector. Mm-hmm. So, if you can't get an appointment with the trade rep for a Democratic administration, where is organized labor going in our country?
I think we just saw in this last election that we're questioning where we're going, that we may not be the ATM for Democrats anymore. One of the things I'm proud of when I became president of the Labor Council 8 years ago is I had a bumper sticker that I think says it all, and had it matted and framed, and we still have it in our office, and it simply reads, "Trade unionists weren't born Democrat, Republican, or yesterday." And you can promise, and you can promise, and you can promise, but when people start seeing that there's no backup to the promise, they stay home, they stay away, they stay out of the process. Now, that's not good for the process, because as we know that when fewer people vote, the stronger business interests, the Koch brothers, are able to take advantage of it. We've got to find a way to get candidates, to get elected officials who understand what's going on. And I think a very good example of that was what happened in Colorado, in the state where the U.S. Senator Udall, an incumbent Democrat, ran away from his policies, ran away from his beliefs, and got defeated, whereas the governor, Hickenlooper, who was in trouble, stood by his policies, stood by his beliefs, and he got elected. So people can tell. It doesn't matter if it's trade unionists, if it's working people, if it's business people. You're going to be upfront, you're going to be honest, you're going to tell what you think is going to happen, you stand with what you've done, people are going to stand with you. If you keep backing away and running away, then we got to question where you're coming from.
Yeah. This is also a ethnic-specific chart, again, the white working class vote. But when you see these kinds of numbers, and given the size of the white working class, those are hellacious numbers for Democrats to surmount. So it's not just a function of union people not embracing the Democrats. They are embracing the Republicans.
Well, in my union, we are a bipartisan union. If you're going to support the working people, if you're going to support maritime, we're going to support you. In fact, in 1 year, we gave money to both Trent Lott and Ted Kennedy because they stood up for maritime. They stood up for working people in that regard. For people to say union members are monolithically Democrat is wrong. I mean, people have their opinions, they have their ideas, they have their views. There are some unions that are almost 50-50 because this is where they come from. And I'm not going to identify some of them. Some of them are public service, some of them are private sector. But if the politicians and the elected officials take care of them, they're going to take care of those who took care of them.
Well, Dolores, maybe you could jump in on this. People, for the most part, vote their pocketbooks.
That's true.
There are certainly exceptions, but it's the economy, stupid. So, are you telling? Are these numbers telling us that the Republican Party has a more persuasive pocketbook agenda or policy vision than Democrats do for working people?
To be honest, I don't think so, because you're looking at one race of people. And when the minority of the people do not come out and vote, that's what happens. Because the minority of people, the majority of the minority people are not going to vote Republican because they don't see where it's going to help them.
But why don't they vote? Because that doesn't help them either.
Because they don't see where it's going to help them. Because too many times they see the Democrats as not much better than the Republicans. And so when they look at the candidates, they don't see where either one of them is going to help them. They don't see a reason to go vote.
Okay.
And unfortunately, that doesn't help the rest of us. So that's not a good thing.
We have about 30 seconds before we go off. Just from your perspective, are there any one or two things that you think that Congress should do just immediately?
Personally, I think they need to go ahead and pass a budget that will get us to several years, not just something that will get us to a couple of months, so that they have another standoff, because that's something that's important to a lot of workers.
Dolores, thank you very much for being on the show. I'm Jeff Barnett. In 2 minutes, we'll be back and we'll be talking more trade, and this time with the Commercial Workers Union.
Thank you.
United Food and Commercial Workers, Jeff.
Oh, yes.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett, and we're talking about politics and labor. And Boaz Young-El has joined us. He's the political director for the United Food and Commercial Workers. So Boaz, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Matter of fact, about a month ago, I needed a ride out of a political fundraiser, and I just kind of said, "Hey, buddy, can I have a ride?" And you said, "Well, okay." So nice to see you again. We're talking about what can be done. I want to have this quote here from the president of the AFL-CIO, Richard Trumka. "I want Hillary Clinton to run on a raising wages agenda and not cater to Wall Street, but to everyday people." Now, I would suspect that this kind of a theme applies with your union also. Mm-hmm. So can you just tell me what do you think is a raising wages agenda? What is your political agenda?
Well, this coming session in Virginia, I can speak for our union, the United Food and Commercial Workers, that we will be pushing a minimum wage in Virginia to be more in line with the national call of 1010. As we know, the political landscape in Virginia is such that it'll be an uphill battle, but nonetheless, it's a battle that needs to be had. So we will put our stake in and fight for 1010.
And is that okay? Is that it, or is that you're going to put all your efforts into that one thing and then put up something else?
Well, as you know, I mean, we partnership with a lot of coalitions, and I'm sure there'll be a number of different agendas on the table. But our main legislative agenda will definitely be the minimum wage, and we'll be putting most of our efforts to that. Yes.
Is there a consensus in the country that having a minimum wage is a good thing, regardless of what the number is? Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we fight over the number, mm-hmm. but there's also a battle in there that a lot of people, kind of believe that no, you should be able to negotiate your own salary with your employer. What's wrong with that? But regardless of what I believe, how do you make that case?
Well, I mean, I think there is a national push for it. I mean, as we can see, in some of the states that, even went Republican in the gubernatorial elections, there was an overwhelming push for the minimum wage, on the ballot. So anytime the question is called, would you like your wages raised? The answer is overwhelmingly yes, across party lines, so.
But raising the minimum wage is only going to do so much for the mass of, middle class, working class Americans. So, what do you see that could be done by either your union or anybody else that would, I think you may have seen the numbers earlier, mm-hmm. About how 1/3 of the workforce is idle, and there's this huge disparity between productivity and wages. So what can we do to close those kinds of numbers?
Well, I think my union, along with the rest of labor, we have to make a push for good jobs. We see the job numbers, and it can be a bit deceitful because while there is an increase in jobs, these are retail jobs and low wage retail jobs, and not necessarily the type of jobs where people are looked at as dignified, quote unquote, nowadays, because there aren't necessarily an economic way to sort of progress in those jobs. Is kind of a dead end when you're looking at wages. It's kind of set at one level and it doesn't really go up, and so it's hard to get motivated in those jobs. And I think if we can create a route to maybe higher wages within different positions, or maybe more access to higher paid positions within those lower wage, those blue collar jobs, I think that may be an answer. I don't think there's necessarily a magic wand. I think it's going to take some hard work, and I think indexing the minimum wage would also help. When it comes along, because year after year, it doesn't matter what you set it at now. In 5 or 10 years, it's going to need to increase again unless you are proactive about it and actually, set an indexing, along.
So you want not only 1010, but an index 1010.
Yes, that would be ideal. That would definitely be ideal to have it indexed. Otherwise, we'd run into the same problem we have now.
Dan, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, a raising wages agenda can mean more than just the minimum wage, as Boaz and Dolores would tell you. It means a way of getting people better wages. And one of those ways is our infrastructure. Nation's infrastructure is falling apart. We have totally ignored what has been going on in our country, whether it's our schools, our highways, our bridges, our rails, our ports, our airports. What people seem to forget is that if you put a little bit of money into rebuilding the country, it's going to go into the pockets of the workers. The workers will then be able to use it to spend, to be able to buy things, to get production moving again, to get things going. We need to invest a little bit in America. For years, we have seen the call from both the right and from the left for Buy American programs, but yet the free market people say, oh no, we need to get it at the lowest price as possible. Well, why in the world, when we have steel mills and steel workers and good plants to produce the steel to rebuild the San Francisco Bay Bridge or to rebuild the Verrazano Bridge, are we shipping it in from China? And it's not even being shipped in on American ships. It's being shipped in on foreign ships. So here's all this taxpayer money, all the money that we have gone out and worked hard for and given to our governments to help rebuild our country, and it's all going overseas. That's part of the raising wages agenda. Let's share at home. Let's take care of some of our folks here at home, and we'll start seeing the economic growth come with it.
You know, we put up a chart here of different, this is from an AFL-CIO poll, what's responsible for economic problems. And again, this particular poll by the AFL-CIO was again, just white working class and white college educated. So again, I apologize for that. It was just easier to grab this data. But I think it would probably be pretty illustrative. Part of it was, that top one, both white working class and white college educated see, almost 80%, see that corporations moving jobs overseas is a huge problem for our economy. Mm-hmm. But we don't see, as the Trans-Pacific Partnership kind of indicates, we're not doing anything about that, right?
Well, again,
or no?
The agreement is in such secrecy right now that the few things that we've seen leak is showing more of this. I am
showing more
of jobs being sent overseas. I am part of a coalition in Canada right now with my job with the Maritime Trades and the Seafarers, in that the Canadian-European Trade Agreement has just been released. We got a copy of it 2 weeks ahead of time through some friends in Europe and found out that here we are trading one thing for the other, and part of what's being traded is almost 50% of the maritime jobs. The ships that are carrying goods from one port in the Great Lakes to another port in the Great Lakes are going to be going to foreign carriers instead of to Canadians. Now, that has been a market that's been people have tried to tap into the United States. And it is inconceivable to me in this time of national security, border security, that we're going to be opening up something as close as the Great Lakes to anybody and everybody who can come in and claim that they can sail. And if they stay on the ships, there's nothing that Customs can do about seeing who's on those vessels.
And do you see any of the political structure, taking on this banner, leading this charge?
We see a couple of people, maybe. We don't see. I fear a rollover. I absolutely fear a rollover with this new Congress that's coming in, and that the White House will not fight it. That that whatever is agreed to, and the way it's being set up is basically it's take it or leave it. You can't change it. You can't modify it. It's take it or leave it. And I just don't see this White House and this Congress is standing up to saying, no, this isn't good for America because it's good for business. And I think we're saluting the corporate flag a lot more than the nation flag.
And so, Boaz, you're the political director. Can you, I guess, for TPP, there's both fast track authority and then final passage. Can you talk about just explain to people what those are?
I'm sorry.
Well, fast track authority means, I guess, what you were just talking about, that
take it or leave it.
Yeah. So it gives the administration authority to simply say, we're going to work this in secret, and then we're going to come in and you can either take it or leave it. You cannot amend it. and Congress would give up that right in advance. Is that right,
yes,
Dan?
That's right. That's right. And that's how NAFTA got passed. That's how some of the other trade bills got passed. And we're talking about the TPP, but there's also a European one to go along with the Trans-Pacific one that's going to come up at the same time. And some of the fears are it's going to come up as early as February or March of next year.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about your union.
Okay. Well, my union is the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Of course, the bulk of our members are in food service, food retail to be exact. So our giant Safeway shoppers here in Virginia, DC, and Maryland. We have about 30,000 members currently. We kind of have a myriad of different industries represented as well, on down to meat packaging, like Tyson's. We have some nursing homes in Maryland as well. So we kind of represent, a slew of different workers, but again, the bulk definitely being in food retail with giant Safeway and Shoppers.
But not Walmart.
There
not
you go.
Walmart.
Okay.
Definitely not Walmart.
So Walmart gets to compete against, here in Northern Virginia, gets to compete with Safeway and Giant with a non-unionized workforce, right?
Yes.
Does that give them an advantage?
Well, the laws in Virginia are such that it gives, it sets the advantage against union employees and unions in general with, this right to work law, which, in a nutshell, tells employees you can receive the benefits of a union without actually paying into the union itself. Which causes a whole free rider problem where you have people using the benefits but aren't actually paying to sort of subsidize those benefits. So.
That law started because the South wanted to attract northern industries, and that industrial age is now over, but it is now continuing into the non-industrial age, into the service sector, which is the fastest growing part of the economy.
It started with the 1948-49 Do-Nothing Congress. Or 47-48 Do-Nothing Congress with the Taft-Hartley law. And in fact, it's been incredible to see what's been going on. It was used by the South to bring manufacturing, and then suddenly the manufacturing was too expensive down here and went over to Mexico, and then after Mexico it went over to Asia and other parts of the world. In fact, one of the things I really enjoy is a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King.
We have about 30 seconds left.
Well, whenever these laws have been passed, wages are lower, job opportunities are fewer, and there are no civil rights. We do not intend to let them do this to us. We demand this fraud be stopped. Our weapon is our vote. That was Dr. King in 1961 about right to work for less laws.
Over half a century ago. I'm Jeff Barnett. We're talking labor and politics. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
This year, 28,000 Americans will be diagnosed with oral cancer. Every year, 7,000 Americans die of oral cancer.
I'm Eva Cohen, and I'm an oral cancer survivor. I didn't fit the profile. I didn't smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer, no family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my mouth that wouldn't heal. It was oral cancer. I had to have a radical neck dissection and a portion of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty. But one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school. And know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
Falls Church.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Jeff Barnett. We're talking politics and labor with two experts. Dan Duncan is from the Northern Virginia Labor Federation, and Boaz Youngell is the political director of the Unified Food and Commercial Workers. Speaking of the UFCW, Best Way grocery store. I think it's a chain, and there's one in Falls Church. They have reached out to you. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, here recently, Best Way, the workers at Best Way actually reached out to us. They were experiencing some problems at their work, same problems that a lot of employees experience in the United States, unfortunately. But this set of workers, they wanted to make some changes, and they reached out to our organizing staff and said we wanted to make some changes. And so our organizers, hit the ground. They talked to their employees. They knocked on doors. They got out there and saw exactly what the employees wanted, what they were asking for, and they got them all signed up on cards and represented by our union, and now they're in the bargaining stages. So this is a testament to when workers come together to make changes at their workplace, it can be a positive change with the right type of people helping them. So.
Right. Let me diverge you here a little bit. Let me talk about yourself just a little bit. How did you get into this business? What did you do before?
Well, actually, I've had the fortune of working in labor my entire professional life. So, which has been sort of short. I don't usually divulge my age, but I'm only 26. I've worked in labor since graduating college. Actually, I moved up here and took an internship with the DC Metro the Washington Metro Council in DC as an intern, working under Josh Williams. And from there, I had a short stint with AFSCME, and then I moved on to UFCW. And so it's been quite the career. I mean, I've worked in organizing. From organizing, I served as a business agent as well on the inside of the stores, and now I'm working in politics. So. And why did you get into this line of work? I mean, obviously you're a smart guy. There's a lot of things you could have done. Why did you pick this one? Well, coming out of college, I knew that I wanted to work for an organization whose ends were in line with my ends, and I couldn't see working 20, 30 years for a corporation or an employer only to further someone else's ends that make working class people's lives harder. And this was labor is the one of the very few job sectors that actually work to make your not your working life but your personal life better. Right, and so there's not many organizations or many different sectors of work to say that we work to make your everyday life more comfortable, right? And so people forget that labor brought them the weekend. They forget that they brought you, the breaks during the day, and it's all of what have you done for me lately. But without labor, we would have none of these things that we enjoy and take sort of take for granted sometimes. So, labor, we struggle, but we're never going to go away as long as the middle class is here, because labor is built the middle class, and so. We're going to be here.
That is well said. Thank you very much. Dan, you're a little bit north of 26.
Well, Boaz, I've been with the Seafarers Union for 27 years, so yeah, a little bit north of that. Fortunately, I came from a little bit of a union background. As I discovered, my mother's father, whom I never had the chance to meet, was a shop steward at the old Cleveland shipyard. And then my father was a tool and die machinist who worked with was a member of the International Association of Machinists. My first union card was in 1973 when I was sacking groceries at Kroger. I still have my original union card framed in my office in downtown Washington. It was before the Food and Commercial Workers had united, and I was a member of the retail clerks. Got through college, and the thing that my sister told me years ago was, we all thought you were either going to go into law or be a preacher. And I ended up coming in, after being a newspaper reporter for a while, coming back to the labor movement. and going to work for the Seafarers Union in Jacksonville, Florida. And for those who don't know, the Seafarers Union represent the men and women on the U.S. flag ships carrying commercial goods, as well as some of the military gear. And the best example for an average person as to who a seafarer might be is if you saw the movie Captain Phillips, the crew members are members of the Seafarers Union. And they are all Americans. And the funny thing about that is the pirates chose the wrong ship because the crew was from a place called Brooklyn, and you going to take my ship? You going to take? And they were so well trained that the captain had worked with them for pirate drills where the guys were even thinking, what's this guy thinking? And then it actually happened. They were able to shut down the ship, and the chief engineer from a secure room was actually operating it as the captain kept his walkie-talkie on to tell him what he was doing so that the pirates would think that they were in charge, and actually it was all being controlled beneath in a very, very hot 125, 130 degree engine room where it took place. So I started with the Seafarers in Jacksonville, Florida in 1987, came up to Washington in 1989 to work in the communications department, eventually becoming the communications director for the International Union. And then in 2000 was transferred to the Maritime Trades Department, which is a constitutional department of the AFL-CIO with 21 different unions who work either with crewing ships, building ships, or supplying ships. And then 3 years ago on which I think is a very appropriate day, April Fool's Day, I was named the Executive Secretary Treasurer of the department and have been serving in that position since and been president of the Northern Virginia Labor Council for 8 years now. You mentioned the AFL-CIO. There was a poll that they conducted just this year that's among all Americans, no classes, no races, whatever, all Americans. And it said that 54% suffered a decline in household income during the past year. Almost 2/3 feel the economy is fundamentally unfair, and 80% believes that both political parties are too focused on helping Wall Street and not Main Street. Let's talk about this a little bit, because before, when we talked about that divergence in productivity and wages, and you said that also coincided with a decline in support for unions. Yes.
It also was coincident with changes to tax law.
Yes.
Does organized labor have any positions on changes to tax law?
Well, one that we would like to see change is that the 1% gets a lot of their money from invested income, whereas the working class pays a higher percentage for actually working for a living. The investor pays a 15% top rate, whereas the working person pays a 30% top rate. And we'd like to see that become a little bit more fair. We have fought for that, we have called for that. We're not seeing any action from, either party about that in Washington. But it's something that needs to be done, something that needs to be looked at to make the tax rates more fair. So the working person doesn't carry the burden that the person who's making millions upon millions upon millions and saying, oh, I don't need to pay as much because, quote, I'm a job creator. Well, every time we see the job creators get their people in Congress, we see the economy slow down. When we see people who understand what people do for, how people work for a living, we see the economy speed up. I mean, President Clinton had a great economic line for 8 years, and then suddenly the job creators came in under George W. Bush, and people politely called 2008, 2009 a recession. I'm sorry, that's about as close to a depression as I hope I ever have to live through, and I hope anybody else ever has to live through, because it comes across more as a depression than a recession when people are still struggling to come back to even.
Right, this was a political cartoon from the time, and I guess that kind of resonates with you.
Yes.
So what you're saying is, I'm putting words in your mouth, but just trying to understand it. Organized labor would probably endorse a kind of a neutral approach to income, whereas it doesn't make any difference from where the income comes, whether it comes from muscle or investment. whether it comes from capital or labor. It doesn't make income is income, and
Yes.
and the tax rates will be uniform.
Should be uniform. Yes.
Across them. Not necessarily a flat tax.
No.
But certainly the tax rate should be the same regardless of the source.
Or should be closer to the same. Should be more fair. I mean, I don't know if in this day and age if you can make, as you said, the flat tax, which we don't agree with either. But it should be closer together so that everybody's carrying their fair share.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a standard charge. That if you get a W-2 these days, if you're part of the, let's not use the word middle class, use the word paycheck class, then you are fully taxed, and all the deductions and loopholes are not really designed for you.
That's right.
Is that a fair thing? And is that a major? I mean, you talk about going for 10-10 indexed. I mean, is this also going on your wish list, your bucket list?
I mean, of course. I mean, if we could get, as Dan was saying, a more level tax rate for those who work for a living, and the job creators and those who actually do the job, it would definitely help. It would help the cause. It's not a one fixed solution. We definitely need sort of many different points of pressure to sort of bring the middle class back up to where it needs to be. I mean, and just what comes to mind, just listening to you guys. I lobbied in Maryland last session, and Maryland just I don't want to mince the details here, but in short, they just it was just a real estate tax cut for millionaires, right? So what it did, it pushed up the threshold, for income, on certain real estate, the tax level. So it gave them another break, along with the minimum wage increase that we did win in Maryland. So I mean, you see, the problem is even when we get these progressive increases like the minimum wage, we still have these things on the back end that kind of hold us stagnant and make the progress, which seemingly progress is really not so much. I don't want to downplay because the minimum wage increase in Maryland is great and it's a step forward. Is it enough? Of course not. But we have to take it a step at a time. But I just think we need to be diligent, in looking across the board and say we're going to pass these laws, but we also need to make sure that the legislation is counterintuitive and counter-reactive to the things that we're doing doesn't get passed. So.
I wish that when I was 26, if I could talk as well and as clearly without notes. Boris, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Dan, as always, you're a great American.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Jeff Barnett. We have been talking about the future of politics and labor. No real solutions, but a lot of great questions. We hope you enjoyed the show. I'll be back in about a month with another set of guests. Good night.